Hello everybody. Welcome to what is hopefully going to be the last robot bearing hat feature video. Well, maybe not the last, but last for a while, I hope. So goal today is to get this fully finished, polished, ready for release. And then, I would imagine I'll get feedback, because there's always more things you can do and, things that can change. I could totally see people asking to be able to configure the diameter of this fillet, or be able to change the wall thickness or things like that. But I think it's easier for now just to release it, and then people can give feedback and we can make changes as later on as needed. So main things I want to do today: final code cleanup, and then I realized right now this doesn't support tapped holes, which is a little goofy, for sure. So I'll probably try to clean that up as well. So we'll just be doing that, and then take another look at my standard library hole implementation, making sure I'm doing that correctly, and everything is logical and sensical there as well. So since the last video, that was like a week and a half ago. So I've done some other work with my lookup table module, getting it ready for changes. I've been wanting to use more lookup tables across all of my features, and so I've been tweaking the API a little bit, and making some changes and things. So nothing too big. The biggest thing is I added support for basically printing an entire studio. So the generated code now looks, let's see here. So if you open this up, right? So the code it prints now includes the FeatureScript version. So it's the full FeatureScript studio. And so that way you just copy and paste it, and you just copy paste it into an entire studio, and it has the automatically generated file. And so that's very similar to the Onshape standard library, how they're generating a lot of their files, although they're obviously not doing it, they're not they're not printing it in FeatureScript and then copying and pasting it and doing it. They have an external tool, they have an external tool, but they do that with all of their enums and things, where it's being generated in code somewhere else, and then they're importing it into the standard library, rather than typing them out by hand. So and then the other change I've made is I used to have that bore type enum. So I believe I was getting these were specifying the bore type, and then down here inside robot bearing hat, there was a this get bore values function, and that was taking a bore type as an argument, and then doing a switch statement off of it to get the bore diameter and then these values. And so now instead we're just adding, defining it relative to the original bore diameter, these values. And then you could also, of course, just put outer diameter and C bore diameter inside the bearing, the bore value as well. So you just add them here, right? And then you would have access to them immediately. So those would both be perfectly fine ways of implementing this feature. It's just what I chose to do while I was developing this. And you could even bore diameter and do the expression thing, right? And then have a parameter that's the bore diameter and the bore width and all of those things. And that way the users could play with it if they wanted to. Stuff like that would be pretty easy. You just update the editing logic to copy those over when you're setting it. And so you could do a pattern like that as well. Would also be more than reasonable. But this is just what I'm doing for now. I'm kind of erring on the side of just trying to be a little more opinionated, not expose every option under the sun. And then if users ask, I can always go back and look at that again. So that's really been the only major code change I've done. So now, so let's take a look now at our last thing here with this, right? So currently this, I realize after the fact, this doesn't support the tapped. So I think we do actually need another table. Let me look at this again just to refresh my memory a little bit. So we have a bearing hat table or bore table, which is, let's see here. So this is bore and width. yeah, born with, which is just our bore, and then you have your width nodes as well. Sure. And then otherwise you just have your bore, and then you have a hole, and then there's a clearance hole. Yeah, so we would just want to update this clearance hole, right? Let me make sure this clearance hole table is only used. Hole table. Let's just see when this is being used. Use clearance table, which is when it's a COTS, or it's not COTS and we're cutting mounting holes. Let's see. So in the not COTS case, when we're not cutting mounting holes, yeah, so there you only want the freer fit because it's just the hat. Okay, so I will need a third lookup table then to handle the COTS case, it looks like, which is a little annoying. If I had realized that last episode, I almost certainly, well, I don't know. There's a lot of things if I had realized I wouldn't have done all of this. But in for a penny, in for a pound has kind of been my catchphrase for the past couple of videos, which is really biting me. But yeah, we'll just go ahead and do it, I guess, because I don't know. It'd be crass to cut it all out now. What have I done? Okay. So yeah, so one weird thing with this that I don't love is the Onshape hole tool, right? So they've updated it. And this is something I think I might have realized it, but I didn't fully internalize it perhaps. But when you're doing a simple hole like this, and you're not going through, so you don't have a fastener fit, right? Because if you do have a fastener fit, then it expects a clearance and a tapped hole. And so it, complains. So the fastener fit, so the weird thing here is like, this is a tapped hole, right? Is this a tapped hole? Oh, it's not a tapped hole. Wait, that's so goofy. Wait, so you set its tab, you have a straight tab, right? You set your threads per inch, right? But then it's just not a tapped hole because, like, you can't make a tapped hole unless you're going through, like, two parts. Wait, that's... Okay, that's actually... that is, like, genuinely not great. Wow, that's pretty bad. So let's just test that real quick, right? So I'll make another extrude here, and then we'll test with our hole, right? So, well, there's this tap through all. Or is this just like a weird implementation with it? So we set our merge scope. Oh, that's if you want to have a partial depth tap. So here, this is still a clearance hole, right? And if I set this to close, wait, what? Oh, I don't get. Okay, sorry. So I got confused there because I don't. Because I saw my feature was producing the cosmetic threads, right? When you do a tapped hole, it's like here, right? If I set this like this and then I make it tapped, right? I get the cosmetic threads. So I would assume Onshape would also create the cosmetic threads. But I realized I forgot this document has not been updated to the latest version of the Onshape standard library because that is a relatively new feature. So I don't get to see them. So let's go out. And the reason why my feature is okay is because I keep my FeatureScript version up to date. And actually the way I do that is my Robot Manager app I have. This guy over here, which you can get, which you can actually get from the App Store. It's available for free. But I have this this action in here that will update all of your FeatureScript studios, all your feature studios to the latest version automatically. So I like to run that every once in a while to keep all my documents up to date, and that way it keeps all the versions the same as well. Because sometimes, especially when you're importing from the standard library and like copying and pasting code specifically, if there's any version desync, like you will get errors, which is very annoying. Anyway, so I'm just gonna make a test document really quickly. So I have a document on the latest standard library version. Okay, just so I can see the behavior for sure. Yeah, so, all right, pop one of these, grab a point, sure. Extrude. Yep, and then I'll extrude it again. New, please. Right. Okay, so yeah, so if we hit it with a whole feature, right? Yeah, so there we see the cosmetic threads, right? And so if I make this a none, right? Yeah, so that's the behavior. And so the goofy thing with this, right, is this is the whole diameter option, right? It's not the actual, it's not like the tapped whole diameter option, which is strange, right? That is a little goofy, for sure. That's definitely not what I would expect. But, you know, it's how they implemented it. Yeah, so if you have a single one, you're only going through a single part and just doing like a regular tapped hole. You don't get the tapped option. You just have the whole diameter. Because I would, you know, right? Because like, of course, in this situation, I would expect to see this one, right, and the clearance to go away. But instead, you get the clearance and right, and it doesn't go away. So it's very strange behavior. I don't know. That's just how Onshape has decided to implement it. And so I'm debating, because I could try showing it and then redirecting to the clearance hole in the back end so everything works out correctly. I don't know what to do. I guess I'll probably stick with what Onshape has to be consistent with the standard library and match their behavior. But I do think it's goofy, and I definitely don't like it. So wag my finger a little bit, but I don't know. It is what it is. Yeah. Okay. So that's fine. Okay, so we need to do a, what is my whole table actually? Is that just what I need? Clearance, tapped, and then fit or thread? Yeah, although I guess that has, let's see, because the problem there is just we're showing the extra parameter. Does it actually have too much UI? Let's see here. So for a simple tapped hole, I would expect not to have a fastener fit, right? Because yeah, you don't have a fastener fit for thread tapping. You just have your 24, 32, UNC and UNF. Okay, so yeah, so I'll need a version of this. Const single tapped. Yeah, okay, so I just need this, and then I just need this guy here, right? And actually I'm thinking now, so I bet what I can do is, I can use some of my new set next utilities, because I need like this, but I just need like this without the, I just need a thread node without the fits added, right? So I just need this option here and then terminating here instead of like going, so I just need like, you know, I need the nodes up to here basically. So let's try and get that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make my whole node. Or wait, hold on, what's going on? So I have my fit node, which allows me, yeah, so I still need hole type. Okay, so let's do const single hole node equals whole node, right? And so this will create a copy actually, because in Onshape, some languages have the concept of like mutation. Actually, Onshape does support it a little bit, right? So for example, if I make a map, and it would have to be a var, right? Map equals, you know, high, right, 2, for example, right? So there's just a map mapping the key high to the value 2, right? So you can mutate it by doing like my map.high equals 3, right? And so now if I were to print my map.high, right? So here it would have print 3, whereas up here, right? Like here you're gonna get 2, right? Because it hasn't been changed yet. And so this is like a concept of mutation basically, because you're modifying the underlying map. But generally speaking, in Onshape, with the exception of boxes, which is like a very niche case that no one really uses, anytime you like assign a variable or like anytime you pass a variable to a function, it will create a deep copy of that variable. And you might say, well, that doesn't sound amazing performance, and you're not wrong. But generally, like it's just like compared to the like overhead of like actually like modeling and like like extruding and like doing all of those operations, like doing a Boolean and things, like all of those are tens of thousand times more performance intensive than like any sort of copying or transforms and things like that. So it's just not like worth it, right? Yeah, because like you save like 1 millisecond, but like 1 millisecond compared to like 100 for like doing like a Boolean or something, like it's just not remotely in the same ballpark. Anyway, so yeah. Okay, so basically what I need is I need a version of the table. Let's see here. Yeah, it's a little hard because I have like all these nested nodes. So here I would want to change these out to instead point to like the values. So I guess the first thing I need is the values themselves. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to copy paste this node here. And we're going to do this, right? And so we'll set the single hole thread node, and then here, instead of this, right, I'm going to have my hole diameter, right, and it's hole diameter because that's what the Onshape feature does, right? They just use the whole parameter still, which is goofy as we were talking about, but it kind of is what it is. So here's the tap 24 value, and the tap 32 is this value here. Yeah, so there's those values. And so now we want, so that gives us a copy of that. And then we want a version of this whole node where instead of this being bound to the thread node, we want it bound to single hole thread node. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my standard hole node. And so equals whole node. Let's see here. Yeah, so here what I'm going to do is I'm going to call set next, right? And so I didn't have this last time, but I've basically created these variants that do various things. So set next takes an array of next nodes, which I could use here, but I'm going to use this last override here. So what this override does is it takes a map of it takes a mapping of the values, right? So these values here in the entries table, the name of the values, and then it maps them to nodes, right? So here, I'm happy with a clearance being mapped to fit node because that's the same regardless, but I need tap to be different depending on the behavior. So I'm going to map tapped. So this one will be tapped, will map to our standard thread node, right? And then when we print our single hole table, right? Now we're going to call this function again, right? But here we'll call our tapped or our single hole thread node, right? And so this will do what we want. I'm pretty sure. And I'll just inline this so it's a little easier to read, right? Yeah, so if we go look at the code now, right? Oh, it's erroring. It's not regenerating properly. That's not amazing. Lookup value. Oh, right. I don't have an overload for just the name, so I'll make that real quick. Yeah, so, because value is optional. Yeah, and it auto-completes. And you'll notice here, I've updated this a little bit so that they now take more maps as parameters, just because maps are a little more variable. Although for lookup value, I found I like having the overloads broken out because it makes the syntax a little more concise. Yeah, so if we look at that, right, so what happens, right, so just to recap, so we have our whole node, right, the clearance option will always map to the FIP node, so you'll get out, that'll build out your close to free option. But then tapped, right, here we're mapping tap to the thread node, right, so that's getting added on. So, this option here, when we call that, will become the thread node, right, and the other one, we're mapping tapped to our single whole thread node, right, so we get our different nodes depending on which table we're building. And so if we look down here, we can see we have our standard whole table, right? Here tapped builds out into our pitch, right? And then we have our fits on top of that. And if we look down here at our single whole table, right? Whole type, clearance, and then tapped gets built out into just our pitch, right? So we don't have the thread sum there. Yeah. And I wonder now if there's even... so that works, and it's probably sufficient. And I think I did write a... Let's go take a look at my library. Yeah, I did also write this function here, which for each lookup node. And this one takes a function that allows you to manipulate. And so that would allow me to potentially, because I had to like copy paste my thread node, you could also rebind these directly, but that's fancier than it needs to be. I don't have to do that because like this works obviously. So I'm gonna roll with this because also this code doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's like not performing or whatever, because it's all static, right? Because it just produces the code, and then the actual code gets executed, and however long that takes is however long it takes. So like, because this doesn't run every time you make changes, right? This only runs once when I replace the studio. So we just do that, right? And so now I have my single whole table in here, and I'm happy. Yeah. Okay, so let's go swap some things around. So I'll have to update some logic. So I will update this. So I'll make a use single whole table, right? Definition is map. Hat type equals hat type dot cots. Maybe this should be single clearance table. So I'll make this single clearance whole table. And I'll update this variable just so that way it doesn't get changed if I ever regenerate. But obviously, like this is the source of truth in my code, so it doesn't technically matter. Use single clearance whole table. Right, so that happens here when it's not cots and we're not cutting mounting holes. Okay, and then so we'll come down here. So if we are using, okay. So we're using our single hole clearance table, right? We'll use our single hole. Okay. Else if use single hole table, right? And I'll probably put this first just because, I don't know, it feels a little better to me. but obviously it doesn't really matter. Yeah, single clearance hole, whole table. Yeah, that seems fine. And then I'll copy paste this, right? Whole table, and this will be our single whole table. So we're happy with that, right? So that should be giving us the right tables we want now. And then I have to update down here which table we're using. So we'll come down here. Yeah, so if use single clearance whole table. Right. Use single whole table. We had as first in the UI, so we'll just do that again. Else, right? Path equals definition dot single whole path. Table equals single whole table. That there, and this was single clearance whole path. That's whole path, whole table. Right. Cool. Nice. And then we make sure this is copying correctly. If the path changes, we get the lookup info. Has clearance is always just going to look at whether we're tapped or not. And then hole diameter, we get that. Yeah, it always expects a hole diameter, and then if we have a tap drill diameter, that also gets set. And so here we just have the hole diameter, so it won't set that. So theoretically, this just works. Let's take a look. So COTS, right? This is the one we changed. So we see we now have our tapped holes. And we see it's complaining about parameters that have been overridden, right? But I do see my tapped hole, so we're happy with that. And then I do see my tap drill is still here, which is not right. That's not updating. Okay, use clearance tables with one argument is not found. So that's not right. Get active path. What is this used for? It's just used for the editing logic. Yeah, I don't love this function because it's already done here, right? I guess we'll just do this. Path equals get dot path. Yeah, we can just do that. Right, and this also gets the table, which is slightly inefficient, but like whatever, it's editing logic. It's not like a performance problem at all. Yeah, so if you change this now, yeah, so that does that, which is good. So yeah, so it updates that as we want. And the hole is still tapped. Okay, and then we come over here, right? We can do our fastener fit. That still works. And then we can change our tapped as well. And if we don't cut the mounting hole, we get closer free, which is correct. Nice. And then here, right, same thing, I would imagine. Cut mounting holes, you get closer free. If you do cut mounting holes, you get your tapped options, and that all appears to be working. Cool. Yeah, so this appears to be right. 24. Yeah, is that right? Smaller, bigger. I'm noticing the diameter changes. 0.1495, 1.59. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, so it's still using the tap drill diameter. And if that's the case, then... Okay, if you're just going to use the tap drill diameter, then maybe we should just use the tap drill diameter. Is what I'm thinking. You know? And we'll just say... Because at this point, like, it's just too easy to use that, I think. Well... Let me think. Or well, let me actually look at my logic, I guess. So yeah, so has clearance is not getting set correctly. So it is a tapped hole, so it should have a clearance. Oh, I guess I suppose I see why it is easier. Do I want to do that? I mean, this could just be get hole lookup info.path. Although this will do weird things if... we'll do... And we'll just roll with it. It's fine. It doesn't matter. I was just thinking if you store the call, then technically you can avoid the lookup, having to run the lookup hole info twice, right? Because it gets called once in here, and then if it passes, then you get calls again immediately, which is a little goofy. But I like this pattern of just like checking, so I'm not gonna worry about it. Yeah, so get the whole lookup info. So right now we're setting has clearance based off of whether or not it's tapped. So that means because we've selected tapped, we're still gonna have the tapped option, which is wrong. So I think the easiest thing to do is just do something like this, right? Single hole table, right? Definition dot has clearance equals false to hide the parameter, right? Otherwise, we'll do our standard logic. Because when it's a single hole table, you always just want the clearance hole option, is the Onshape logic. So I'm not going to argue with them too much. So now when we change to COTS, right, we get that, right, and that happens regardless of clearance or tapped, right, and then if we come back, right, it updates properly. So that's good, we like that. Okay, and then, oh, I see, so we actually are getting the, so this is not a tapped hole currently, probably because it's using that is tapped. Really? Okay. Well, yeah, because the thing is, if I wanted to hide the whole diameter and show the tap diameter, I would need another parameter to handle that, right? And then I would have to rebind them properly. And so that is a lot of rebinding for my taste, probably. So, yeah. That would be quite a bit. So... path that size equals number 10, path type is straight tap. Okay, yeah, so I wanted to update, that's right. So I wanted to update this to go through both faces. So I'll start going ahead and doing that. So basically I want to have one hole operation that cuts both holes because the hole obviously supports that. And as opposed to like sketching the mounting holes and extruding them through one and then like using the hole tool for the other. It doesn't really, if you're gonna use the hole tool, it may as well use it for both. So we'll go ahead and do that. So that means here, right? So here is where we extrude. Yeah, so we create the bearing hat base and then we cut, we sketch out the mounting hole faces and cut them. Actually, I'll just delete this code because I know I won't need it. So we'll just get rid of those. I could cut the bearing hole using hole as well, but it's just, this is just easier. And people shouldn't need attributes for that because it's a big counterbore anyway. Is that true? Some people might want it. I don't know. If people want it, I could always add it later. But doing it this way using simple primitives does save quite a bit of overhead because the whole tool is very slow. is what I'll say about that. So yeah. Okay, so we get rid of those, and does that mean, yeah, so we don't need mounting hole faces anymore here. So we can get rid of a parameter, which is always nice, right? If we go up to create bearing hat, we get rid of our mounting holes.faces, right? And then I believe, yeah, we're using mounting holes.locations. So we won't have that now. So that's not great. And then this is always going to happen now, right? It's kind of the behavior we've gotten ourselves into, which is fine. And then we won't have the locations cut yet, which is fine too. Okay. Yeah, so this creates just like the shell of the bearing hat, but it won't have like the outer holes yet, which we're fine with. And then hole diameter. Yeah, so hole diameter is only used inside this function, so we don't need to pass that in either, right? We just need to pass in the scope. And the scope would just be, yeah, we get that up here, which is fine. And I guess we probably want to pass in the bearing hat as well now. Although the bearing hat could just be part of the scope, I suppose. Yeah, this returns a query for the bearing hat. Oh, how do I want to do this actually? Because the bearing hat does not always exist. I guess we'll do one of these. Bar bearing hat equals q nothing, right? And if we do have a bearing hat, then it'll become the actual query, right? And the q nothing here is helpful because that way we, because it was undefined, q union undefined is invalid. So that would be an error, but this way it's not. So just, you know, doing a little trick there. Yeah, so then we do that and then create bearing hat. Yeah, and this was a thing too. I was confused why this was necessary, but not this one. But we'll get there. Yeah. Okay, so that's fine. Fill out concave edges, yes. Cut mounting holes, okay. Yeah, so we got rid of this query here, and we got rid of the hole diameter. And I'll rename this parameter to like hat and scope. Right, and I'll just document that real quick. So this is something you almost definitely won't have to do, or you almost definitely I mean, you can do it, but like you shouldn't have to worry about it. Is you can actually use JS doc comments to document your FeatureScripts. And you can even like do autocomplete and like autocomplete maps and things like that. So like some of my standard library features, I like nerd out and like do all of that. So that way you have like the nice comments and things. So for example, like my evaluate or EV mate, what is it? No, yeah, so like this evaluate vertex chord system, right? I'm actually nerding out and doing like all the documentation, just like Onshape does. So you can see like, you know, you can like set like say like, hey, this is a map and like these are the fields. And like when you call it, then like Onshape will actually build that out for you, which is kind of neat. And you can like even specify like whatever values you want in here, so you can have like, you know, like actual defaults, which is kind of neat. So I like nerding out and doing that because it kind of appeals to me, but like obviously like taking the time to memorize all the syntax and stuff is almost certainly not worth it, because typing it by hand is a little cringe for sure. But I don't know, it makes me happy, so I'll do it. But yeah, so here hat and scope is a query for the bearing hat if present and bodies to cut. So we'll do that, right? And it really shouldn't matter, I think, because the whole tool should just cut through all. But it's nice to delimit that, like, hey, the hat should be part of that. Okay, so then here, right, so we can get our hole diameter now. So definition, right, so we can do that in here. And then here we build out our path. And so I really need to know if we have a bearing hat. Equals, and then I think we just have like is Kot's hat, yeah. So this tells us if we have a bearing hat or not. Just that way, because I know like our logic is going to depend on that. And then let's see here, what else do we have? So const has bearing hat, and then const has mounting holes equals has bearing hat, or it's not like cut mounting holes, I think is the parameter name. Let's just check, because I don't remember making a predicate for that. Yeah, cut mounting holes. Wow, okay, I binked that first try. Yeah, so we have mounting holes if we don't have a bearing hat, because we know I've coded this feature so it never can do nothing, right? So if we don't have a bearing hat, or if we're cutting the mounting holes, then we'll obviously have the mounting holes. So these are the two things I need to know when I'm like trying to figure out what hole settings to have. And then I need to sketch my mounting locations. And so for that, I'm realizing actually that function I deleted, I do want that sketch mounting holes, because I still need to sketch the points regardless. Because hole only takes queries, right? It doesn't take geometrical entities. And that's very different from like most things in the standard library. Or like most, you know, like this is very different from like how you would normally work with, or expect to work with like features like this. Because normally you can just like say like, hey, I want, you know, to cut a hole along this line, a line just being like a point in like a direction in 3D space, right? Because you can get that in a myriad of ways. Whereas a query, like you have to make it yourself, which is very annoying. But yeah, so I'll just go through my version history and grab the function again, right? Yeah, so I'll just Control-C, Control-V that, and we'll go down, hum-de-dum-de-dum, right? Okay, and I'll shove it down here. Okay, so sketch mounting points, right? Yeah, we'll have a plane. Mounting locations is array, and I'll say whole plane, right? Because the start plane is actually going to be a little bit different, because we're going to need to, it's going to have to be the top of the bearing hat, so it goes through the hat and the plate. But if you don't have a hat, then it's just going to be the plate, right? So it needs to shift based on whether or not you have a bearing hat. So that's why that logic matters. And then here we don't need the hole diameter, right? And instead of cutting the circle, we're going to sk point this sucker. And actually, I bet I could just do, well, okay. Yeah, so sk circle, right? First mounting, location, right? Position is obviously going to be this, right? Control-C, Control-V, right? 1. That's the second mounting location now. I fat-fingered it. So we'll do it like that, and like this, and like that, just so it's a little more syntactically concise. And then we'll do that, right? And then I don't need the faces, so this can just return a query, and this can just return that. And then my auto formatter, okay, there it goes. Okay, so cool. Yeah, sometimes if you have like a syntax error, like an extra bracket or like an extra, or like a missing brace or something like that, the auto formatter will stop working. And so if you use your auto formatter often, right, and you ever click it and it doesn't work, then you know, like, you know, one of the things you just changed is wrong, or like, you know, you have a missing brace or something like that. And it can be really helpful to identify that sooner rather than later, because the syntax highlighting for like having an extra brace is really quite broken. So like if I just like toss one in here, right? I guess I guess sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not. They might have updated it too. But for the longest time, you had like a missing brace. The error would only appear at the top, like this. You know, it wasn't actually indexed like the line or like anything like that. So literally, like the only way of like knowing where that error is, like, is you just kind of have to like, find it basically, which is a little unhinged. Or like, I guess you could like maybe like comment out like half your document and like do like a binary search over your document to find the error. Because you like comment out half of it, see if it formats. If it does, then you know it was in the section you commented, and you know you can like narrow it down that way. But obviously that is not a good time, not something you want to be doing. So yeah, so format early, format often is just the best thing to do in general. And maybe Onshape has fixed it. So yeah, okay. So anyway. So our mounting locations equals sketch mounting points, right? And here, okay, so here we do need our mounting locations. Here's an array, right? So we're gonna have to pass those in. And then I guess we also need our plane. Yeah, so we'll do that. So I'll need our circle plane is plane, right? Okay. So then here, right? So if we have a bearing hat, right? Then we need to shimmy our plane out. So that way we're cutting through the bearing hat, right? And so for that we need to know how tall the bearing hat is. And so that, let's take a look. So that's just going to be how far we're extruding it, right? And so right now it's 0.125 inches, right? So I'm just going to extract that into a constant right now for now. With, or depth, I guess, equals 0.125 times inch, right? And just so that way, you know, if I ever change it, right, then I know, or, you know, I know it's a constant. And that way it's easier to find, like, everywhere it's being used as well. Because if you have, like, magic numbers, like, that are supposed to be the same, like, sprinkled throughout your code, and, like, it's very easy to change one later and then, like, forget to change the other. Like, if I ever decided to go back and, like, you know, change the width of the hat or something, or, like, make it a parameter so, like, users can change it, or like maybe like drive it from like the lookup table or something like that, you know, then knowing exactly everywhere the bearing hat width is being used is helpful, because it's not always obvious it's being used in places outside of the extrude, for example, unless you know, programmed it yourself and you knew exactly what was happening. And even if you did program it, you might forget. So okay, so here we're going to update our circle plane. So circle plane equals circle plane dot normal. So yeah, so this is just like standard geometrical manipulation stuff. I need to shimmy the circle plane dot origin, and I'm going to do that by moving it along the normal by the bearing hat depth, right? And so here it's helpful. The normal is a unitless vector, right? So it has a length of 1. And so when you multiply something with a length of 1 by a distance, then you're going to move along that direction by the given distance, right? And so that's just like a multivariable calculus, like geometrical thing, right? It's just like knowing like normalized vectors and all of that, and it's just like standard vector math. But this type of pattern is pretty common, where you're like, you know, shimmying a plane by like its normal some amount. It's kind of our bread and butter. But yeah, so then here we'll do this, simple plane, right? And if we wanted to be the most precise, we could do this, right? So rather than like mutating the circle plane, we can like make a new plane just to make it explicit. But we're not, I mean, it doesn't really matter because like circle plane is a copy anyway, because it's inside a function. So we don't have to worry about mutating it. But I think just like semantically make it clear, like, hey, this is a different plane than our circle plane. And then I'll just keep the names consistent, even though it doesn't really matter, right? Because, you know, when you, like, the name of this parameter is different from what you pass in. You know, they can be different concepts, but it's helpful to, like, keep the concepts consistent. Anyway, okay, so that happens, which is fine. Yeah. Okay, so we do that. We get our locations. And I am playing really fast and loose with like the word locations, because in some points, like here, it's describing a vector, like a, you know, like an XYZ point in 3D space, and here it's defining an array of queries. So a little dubious, but that's okay. Okay, so yeah, all right, so we do that. So that should be adjusting our locations now. And then we always want to be going through all, that's the same. And then, so whether or not we have clearance will be has clearance now, I think. Is tapped through is always going to be true. Because that should turn on or off depending on whether it has clearance is set. Hole diameter will set, should always be hole diameter. Can you just do a straight tapped hole? Or well, because we're just setting it correctly now. So this should always be like this. And then tap drill diameter is always going to be the tap drill diameter. And then major diameter is just chilling there. I suspect major diameter just doesn't need to be set. Or it can be set to like an arbitrary value as long as it's present, because it's just like Onshape, you know, just has a bug in their API. But one thing at a time. Okay, so we did that. Yep. So we added parameters. What did I add? Circle plane and I think locations. Yeah, it looks like I usually pass circle plane before locations, so that's probably the correct order. Okay, let's see what we got. So we got our standard hole. It's complaining about parameters being overridden, which is not amazing, but one thing at a time. So custom hole. Okay. So let's see. Okay, let's actually verify. So if my fit changes, that works, right? If I change to this, that works. And if I do a clearance hole, that goes through both, and it's close, and it's free. Okay, so that works, and it's the same for standard hat and custom hat. And then COTS, if I do a clearance hole, I can do close or free. And if I do a tapped hole, I can do tapped or clearance. Although it's not actually getting marked as tapped, so that's not good. So we need to fix that part. So let's see what we got. Got mounting holes. Okay, so I assume this is a problem with this. Should also be checking attributes, I suppose. I'll do that shortly here. Has clearance. This might be wrong here. Path that fit. Oh yeah, so if it's going through multiple parts, yeah, so it's going through multiple parts when it's you have a bearing hat and we're also cutting mounting holes. Right, I don't actually need, well, I'll keep this for a second, but I don't think I need it. And technically you have multiple parts if you have, like, if we ever allowed the scope to cut through multiple things, but like one thing at a time. So if we have multiple parts, then we will actually have a fit on our path, I think is right. So if has multiple parts, then path dot fit equals it'll be whether or not it's close fit or not, which we should be setting, right? Yeah, because we have our close and free fit here. So we just need to not override that. So definitely has clearance and has multiple parts, right? Then we want to set path.fit to none, right? So we don't want to set path.fit to none when we are cutting through multiple parts, because you do need the fit on top of the tapped, I think is the logic. Okay, so it's still not tapped, so that's not amazing. Let's verify this, I guess. So let's check our whole table. Okay, and I'll get rid of this just so I don't have conflicting UI. Okay, so yeah, so we got our holes, right, which is cool. So those are both 0.201 right now, which is fine. Now I make them close, that works. Okay, so now if we make them tapped, okay, it is not having a good time. That's not what you love to see. Table title, oh boy. Okay, so we're getting an if statement. Condition must be Boolean, it's undefined. So let's take a look, Is tapped through. Okay, so it's not really. What line? 206? Okay, yeah, so it's complaining its tap through is not set, which is a little surprising for sure. Must be Boolean, value is undefined. Okay, is there an is tapped through? Okay, so just like that, we're back to like checking through v2. No. Oh boy. Okay, there is only one is tap through parameter. Because we definitely don't want to have to set all of these things, that's for sure. Because my life is too short. And I will cry. Tip angle style. Okay, so it is being set, right? Like it's being passed. Let's try this. Okay, so that brings us back to that. Fit is wrong, really? Why can't I pass a fit? I mean, these attributes are correct, right? Which makes me want to conclude, right, and if I do like 0.5, whoop, 0.15, sorry. Right, so that works, right. So like that part is all fine. Parameters has been overridden is obviously wrong, but one thing at a time, right? Okay, so that's surprising, or I mean that just works, right? So I might have been wrong about the fit needing to be set to none, or maybe it just doesn't matter. Right, and so here we're not setting like the whole attributes, I think, is the problem. So yeah, so has clearance will be false. Will be false when you have multiple parts. Let's see here. So this is wrong when Yeah, so there's times where you have where you don't have clearance, but it's not tapped, because has clearance is being used to hide and show that tap parameter. So this is wrong. And so we should not be setting it to tapped if we're using a single whole table. Else if use single whole table. And really we should be checking if the path is tapped. And this should technically be down here. Rather than checking has clearance, let's check, let's just break out our tables again. If use single whole table, right, one set of parameters, else if use else do that. Is that right? So this will be the whole table, let's just support everything. I don't like that. I don't like this logic. Because the problem is, just because you're using a whole table, right, you can be tapped or not clearance within that table itself, which is not great. I'm almost wondering if it would be easier to do the rebinding, because that way at least has tapped is consistently, like, you know, whether or not you're actually having a tapped hole. Tap drill diameter can be undefined? That seems wrong. What a big stinky mess. God, the logic is so inconsistent. I really hate it. Okay, let's do this. Const is tapped equals path dot. Let's check. It'll be path dot whole type equals clearance, or well, yeah. Marijuana will be tapped, but you get the idea. Okay. So that tells us whether or not we're tapped. Okay, and then const right, and then whether we have a clearance hole will be if we have clearance or if we have multiple parts, right? So we have a tapped hole always if the whole type is tapped, right? Because, you know, these are selecting tapped, they're getting a tapped hole. And then we have a clearance hole if the whole type is clearance, right? So if they selected a clearance hole, then we know we're going to get at least one clearance hole, possibly two. Or otherwise, if there's multiple parts, then we know we're going to have a clearance hole because through the bearing hole. So we'll do it that way. So then, and then I'll see how my logic shakes out, because I suspect I don't actually need has clearance hole, but yeah. Okay, so if we have that, then we're going to add our size and straight tap, and then if, let's see here, if we have a clearance hole, right, then our fit will be the whatever fit the user chooses, right? Else, path.fit will be equal to none. And here, let's see here. We had path.type equals clearance. So it'll be tapped if it's a clearance and a tapped hole. So I think this will just be I think that's the behavior, which is a little strange. Okay, let's see what we got. So that's a tapped hole, so that's right. We can do 32, cool. We can do like 0.17. Okay, nice. I guess it's not so bad with the cosmetic threads, because like you can see it's a tapped hole. But I don't know, it still seems goofy to me, considering they have a tapped hole icon, but what are you gonna do, right? Okay, so then we can do our standard hole. So I see that is correct. Right, we can change that. We can change that. Everything seems to be updating correctly. All right, if I change to clearance, I get a clearance hole, and I can still change the fits. Okay, if I don't have a mounting hole, I still have a mounting hole, which is wrong. Okay, yeah, because if we're not cutting the mounting holes, I'm still passing the scope, so we need to fix that. Okay, so I'm going to rename this the generic hole scope, because I don't feel like passing in the bearing hat separate from the hole scope, because sometimes the bearing hat is not defined. So I'm just going to specify that. And then cut mounting holes, right. Question mark bearing hat. Well, let's see here. So if it's not a COTS hat, right, we're going to have and technically this could just be bearing hat, right? Because if we have a bearing hat, we're always going to cut it. And then if definition dot has mounting holes or cut mounting holes, right? And this parameter, of course, only makes sense if we don't have a COTS hat. Then we're going to scope. And I'm realizing now that scope can just sometimes be undefined. Well, I guess it doesn't matter semantically here, because like it just returns whatever the bearing edge is attached to. It doesn't check, but there's no check to verify that. You know, it doesn't return Q nothing if we're not actually cutting mounting holes. There's no logic there. So, which is a little strange, but well, I guess it makes sense. But it's just it's just good to know. Yeah, so I think that's right. And so you could even simplify this a little bit by bringing this up here. Equals Q nothing, right? Okay. So my only concern with this right now is with this whole scope, right? I want to make sure that it doesn't become vacuously true when you're cutting a mounting hole through the bearing hat, right? Because, like, for example, right, if you had this too close to the edge, where this is not cutting the mounting hole. Okay, so here the whole feature is happy. Even though, like, we're not cutting through that because it's cutting through the bearing hole, so it's always going to find something to cut through, which is not amazing. Although, I think when I think about it, I don't really care. Although I don't love, right, because you could imagine a situation where you're not cutting either mounting hole, right? And so, you know, you're telling it to cut the mounting holes, but it's not. And so that should be an error, but it won't be because the scope will include something at least. Unfortunately, there isn't really a way to fix it without just having two features, or like having the whole feature run twice, right? Because that way you have one that just cuts the mounting holes and then one that cuts the holes in the bearing hat, like we were doing before. So that's not amazing. We could go back to the way we're doing it. And not have the whole attributes. How's performance? It's about fine. Yeah, that's fine. 50 milliseconds is about par for the course for features. I mean, because the bearing hats will always be 3D printed, so you don't really need the whole attributes. I mean, someone could conceivably machine them, but, like, whatever. And, like, if you're machining them, like, you don't need the whole attributes, for goodness sake. Yeah, I'm not thrilled. Let's see, how is this working? So if we do this, so if I do like 0.2 now, okay, but that's using my error. Feature info. So I should be able to just not have that check, because it should do it for me, and it doesn't. And I wonder if that's because that's a V2 versus V1 issue. So I make that hole diameter. So I'm going to leave that as hole diameter, but I'm going to try mapping it. And seeing if that maps the, well, if it's not throwing the warning, it won't. Let's see here, hole diameter V2. That should work. It should detect the discrepancy between what the lookup table is saying and what the user has said. So surprising that's not. I need to make a decision about how I want to actually do that, because if we are going to do the two whole table thing, or I definitely don't want to call the whole feature twice because that's annoying and cringe. But I could go back to how I was doing it before. I wish I'd thought about it a little more before embarking on this grand adventure. But that's life. Do we back up the bus here? Oh, it's so annoying. I'm not happy. I did like how I had it before, where it would warn you if it wasn't cutting the mounting holes. So I am, yeah, okay. All right. So I'm going to back up the bus here. So I'm going to pull this over to my second screen so I can copy paste easier. Right, so I just have my version over here. Maybe I can split screen it. Yeah, okay, I'll split screen. Okay, so I'm just going to copy paste some code back, basically, from the previous version. So this is why making versions is good, because otherwise we would be probably a little sad. Yeah, I guess you still have like this version history you can scroll through, but like obviously that's a lot less fun. Okay, so yeah, so this is fine. Create bearing hat is fine. I cut mounting hole faces out. Yeah, so we'll do that. So create bearing hat. Okay, I'll update my functions first, and then I'll go back and update the call sites. Yeah, so this will become like this, right? I don't need this variable anymore. We'll just leave it hard-coded. It's just easier that way. Oh, I think it was actually 0.25 inches. Was it? Wait, what? How thick is bearing hat? Bearing hat is 1/8 of an inch. Yeah, it's 1/8 inch plate. Wait, no, it's 1/4 inch. What? Wait, what is this? Extract faces, extrude. 0.125. Huh? What is this then? Is this just wrong? Okay, I think I do actually need my bearing hat. Wait, how thick is the bearing hat? It's crazy I don't know. Oh, it's broken now. Ugh, rip. Oh, I can measure over here. It is 0.125 inches thick. Okay, I don't know what I'm... Okay. So this was just wrong, which is the funny thing. Hat depth. Right, so that was just too deep. It was deeper than it needed to be. This is 3/16 of an inch? What? Oh yeah, because you need an axis. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because holes have to have a tip on them. Okay, so this is bearing hat depth. Hat depth, okay. Yeah, so mounting hole faces. That'll be down here. Okay, and then we'll come up here and we'll grab yeah, is this really what I want to do? I guess so. Yeah. I don't know. I did like how it was cleaning up the code, but I don't know. I do think it's nicer to have... I do think from the user perspective, it's nicer to have it a little more streamlined. And I think it's technically more performant this way. Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. Mounting dot faces, circle, plane, bore values, mounting locations. And that query wasn't even getting used, but that's fine. Yeah, so we don't need that. So this will just be scope. and holes, right? Okay, it looks like get hole diameter is trending towards just being a trivial getter. So we will move. Oh, okay, fine. Well, definition not hole diameter, I guess. Sheesh. Yeah, the mounting holes. Oh, they might not be mounting holes if you're not actually cutting mounting holes. What am I doing? Okay, let's see here. So when you have the bearing hat, whether or not you're cutting the mounting holes doesn't matter because the feature doesn't care. Which is goofy. Do I sketch the mounting locations separately from the mounting holes? That's probably the best thing to do. That's not what I want to do, but is that the best of... Is that bad? I don't know. Okay, let's do that, I guess. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. All right, I don't love this, but sketch mounting hole faces. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a function to get the faces and then a function to get the locations. Because even though you can get both, I don't like sketching the faces when we don't need them. Although I agree it's a little... I don't know. I think it's a little cooked either way, but whatever. Mounting locations, definition, hole diameter. Right. And we'll just return that. This will return a query. Yeah, and then you don't need them as arguments. And you don't need, yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so that works. It's a little janky, of course, but I don't know. We could also like actually sketch the bearing, the counter bore now, and like not do the whole thing and not have 3 booleans. But meh, I don't particularly. That's what I don't particularly care for. Or I just don't think it matters. Okay, so we'll do the mounting holes here, right? We'll still have mounting locations and scope and circle plane, right? So this, the nice thing about this is a little more defined exactly what's doing what, because I'm splitting out the 2 operations explicitly, which I do appreciate. Yeah, so we don't need these functions. Get cap, drill diameter. So we'll just get rid of those. And then, yeah, so we sketch the mounting hole faces, right? We create the bearing hat. And then here, right, I'm going to instead, yeah, sketch mounting points, right? So this is just a very similar function, which is, I think, fine. Yeah, and we already have that. Okay. Points. Okay. This does not need to be, oh, that does need to be the top level ID because we are using this does need to be the top level ID because we're binding to the standard hole feature, which is important to know. Okay, and so hole diameter here is just going to be definition of hole diameter, right, const tap drill diameter. Okay, and then this will be definition of head clearance. Actually, that's not true. It will be if it's a tapped hole. Because it will always be tapped if the hole type supports tapped. And one of the tables does not have a hole type. Yeah, and so, and that's okay because path.hole type, right, it'll always be a map and hole type will just be undefined, so undefined equals tapped is false. But that being said, I kind of hate that like we're relying on that implicitly to be true, because that's a very non-obvious fact. I'm gonna go back to OneStudio now. Okay, so I definitely am not a huge fan of that, but I'm gonna leave it for now, and we will, I'm definitely gonna revisit that in a second here, and then the fit will always be none. Yeah. So I think that's right. Okay, and then is tapped through is always going to be true, I guess. Yeah, that can just be true, I think. Has clearance is going to be false. Because because it doesn't matter if it's tapped or not. And so then these won't get used. Right. And we'll have to propagate feature status creatively, I think, but one thing at a time. Okay, and this will be hole diameter. All right, so we can just do that, I'm pretty sure. We don't need this modifier now. So this can just be circle plane. Circle plane and circle plane. Right, again, you don't really have to update the naming if you don't want to, but I like to just for convenience sake. Okay, yeah, so now we're getting that, and then, which I like, actually really like. So, yeah, and then scope, whole scope, I mean, this can just be scope. No. Okay, and then let's look at, so let's make sure this behavior is correct before we go too far. Okay, so there's a tapped hole. We'll check the hole table. Right, so we're just getting the mounting holes, which I'm fine with, as discussed. 1.5, yep. Close and free, and 32. And then if we do clearance, it's just going to be clearance hole. right, and free, and this is the same thing. If we don't cut the mounting holes, we don't cut the mounting holes, and we don't get, you know, a choice there, which is fine. And then if we come over here, right, it's still, you can do tapped holes and you can do clearance holes, and that works. Okay, cool. Okay, and then here it's doing the some selections do not produce holes, which is correct, but it's not showing the tool, which I don't love. So what's going on with that? Propagate error display is true. Also feature in process status, ID plus hole. Cut mounting holes. Let's make sure it's actually getting the top level ID. It is. That's weird. Oh, maybe that error just doesn't produce holes. Yeah, it just warns. That's just the behavior. So, because this part still works, which is good. We like that. This is a very nice error, of course, that we're very happy with. And that happens even if you are cutting the mounting holes and you got your direction wrong or whatever, right? You're still gonna get that error, which is good. And if we really wanted to wild out, you could have the bearing hat be red here, but it's not worth it. Because obviously when you are handling your mounting holes properly, then you get the bearing hat. It doesn't matter. It's clear what's going on. Okay, so yeah, so that is all correct. We're happy with that. So let's shimmy this over and just look at this. So here I just want to check the overridden stuff. So that doesn't work. If I change this to tapped and I do 0.2, so that does work. And so the reason for that is, oh, and that also means this isn't going to work. Yeah, okay, so that, right, because we're not using the whole feature, so we're going to have to do that ourselves, which is fine. Well, it's not amazing because I deleted that function for no reason. Okay, so we need this. Okay, so I don't want to shove this. I'll probably shove it like in here. I think is fine. I'll clean this logic up. Okay, and then here, right, so I said I wanted to revisit this. I'll do that right now. So if we are, if we're using the single hole clearance table, right, then we are going to be, let's see here. So if we're using the clearance table, it's always going to be false, right? Otherwise, it's going to depend on whether or not we're a tapped hole or not. Use single clearance hole. Wait. Hole tables, single clearance hole, single hole. Okay, why am I getting autocomplete for a bunch of things that don't exist? Yeah. Okay, so for using the single clearance hole table, right, it's never going to be tapped, otherwise hole type is tapped. So that's the same logic, it's equivalent, but this way at least it's a little clearer exactly what's happening. Okay, so has multiple parts is not being used, so we don't care. Has bearing hat is not being used, so we don't care. Hole diameter is being gotten here, right? So instead of getting the hole diameter, I'm just going to have it verify hole diameter. Is the easiest thing to do. So this just won't return it, right? Yeah, because then I don't have to pass it down through the functions and things. And that means semantically, right, this makes sense up top, right? So I'll shove this up with my other verify functions up here, right? I will throw it, I'll just throw it here. Hole diameter, right? Okay, so I'm just going to make a note that we don't need yeah, that we don't need to do this for tapped holes because we have the standard hole feature to do it for us. Yeah. So on the other hand, yeah. Since tap holes only go through the part. Or I'll just leave it like that. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just document that so that interaction is a little clearer, hopefully. Yeah, and this might not even be true anymore, but wait, is it not even true anymore? Let's check. Because they added the ability to have the tip. Nope, it's not true. That's funny. Rip. Okay. Okay, must have a tip. Yep. And then let's see here. Any other things I wanted to do? We're not returning. We're not using this, so I just won't return it. That doesn't matter. But I mean, there's not a point in returning something if you're not going to use it. This is no longer relevant. That's just the scope. We cleaned that up, which is good. Okay, let's see what's going on here. So okay, so you do have to provide both of those. Tap drill diameter isn't used. A single hole. Okay, and then let's see. So major diameter. So I suspect major diameter is required just because there's bugs when you don't, but the value does not matter. And so let's test that by doing 500 times meter. Yeah, so my whole attribute is still correct, right? But then if I comment it out, right? No, it still works. Okay, that is, oh, yes, there's your problem, right? So yeah, it's, yeah, it's such a goofy, it just, like, it doesn't get used. Right. And let me verify that rigorously by, how do I want to do that? I could check the underlying attribute. That's probably the easiest way. Otherwise, you could make it, I was thinking about making a drawing and, like, doing that. I'm going to just get the attribute and check. So I'm going to bring back my query checker. Get attribute definition dot my query. And then this will be undefined because we're doing the legacy named attributes because that's what whole attributes are. All right, let me make sure actually. Set attribute. Just make sure all of the attributes in here. Interesting. Yeah, so attribute is always entities and attribute, never a name. So, and then they set it on different entities, it looks like. It does look like there's logic in here to handle other types. I bet for like complex holes, it might mark like the tip and stuff, perhaps. But because we're doing simple through all holes, it's just the simple ones, which is nice. I need another one of those on there. Okay, so let's do a little inspecting. Thought that wasn't a requirement. I could have sworn. Let me go check. Let me check. Let's see here. Get attributes. If attribute pattern is provided. Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, so it's get attributes, not get attribute. Funny distinction. Oh, yeah. Relax, relax, we're getting there. Okay, so I need to specify... Wait, really? I don't need you. Okay, there we go. Okay. Entities. Okay. Yeah, so here, right, so whole feature count, whole number, whole type, is tapped whole, is tapped through. Oh, so major diameter is getting set. So that's fun. Tap size, tapped angle, tap depth. Yeah, okay, so with that in mind, then I will properly set it. 0.1900 times inch. And then these are all required as well, I'm pretty sure. Let's just check. Oh, maybe not. Hold on. I get the feeling the feature is about to have a bad time. Okay, one of those is required at least. Let's see, still failing, yup. Try that. Oh, it's happy. It is happy. Okay, so maybe you don't need those two, I guess. Which makes sense because we're not actually tap drilling. We are pretending to tap drill, but we're not actually. So yeah, okay. Okay, let's see if we can get away with not having a hole diameter. We can? Question mark? Okay, I don't know. I was, well, let's check. Hold on. Hang on. Let's check if this becomes close. Okay. If we're cutting a standard 0.2. Okay. All right, that works. Interesting. Yeah, okay, so I don't need that, which is good. That makes me happy. And I do need the major diameter, I do need the precision stuff, which is fine. I think that's reasonable. Has clearance is false is fine. Do I need that? Some of those things should default to false or true, and it should just be fine. Close, free, tapped. Okay, cool, that works. Unit system? Do need a unit system. Okay, precision is, okay. All right, cool, and everything else I should need, I would imagine. Thread standard? No, don't need a thread standard. Right? Check the whole attribute. Looks pretty okay to me. Is tapped hole, is tapped through, yeah. Okay. Cool. End style? End style required. Okay. Yeah. So obviously, like, you know, obviously I had it working, so, but I like to try to be a little more minimal, because having to pass a bunch of parameters that I don't need, is kind of annoying. Is tapped hole, is tapped through, so is tapped, yeah. Just open it up, make sure it's still correct. Even with like a clearance hole. Yep, okay. Because I bet some of these, like, oh, it does default to false actually. But I don't know. I mean, it's clearly tapping through, so maybe it's just tapping to like a depth of a ½ inch, but then it's detecting that's the full width. So I'll leave that to true. So I'll make it a comment. That's not strictly required, but probably good to have. Yeah. Okay, so with that, I believe that is a functional feature. It appears to do everything I want, right? This still works. Yep, angle reference, still okay. You can still give it a flip and stuff like that, so that's all good. We're happy with that. Custom hack works. You can connect the mounting locations if you want. And you can do all your whole things. So yeah, I am chuffed with that. So last thing, I'll get rid of this then. I don't need that anymore. Probably should have just like a test feature that prints queries. I think someone actually posted one at some point as well. You know, like Query Explorer or something like that on the forums. One of the developers. So it just does something similar. Or I guess mine does attributes, and Query Explorer is just for queries. So that's actually quite different. But yeah, so a little peek under the hood. So last thing I'll talk about is releases, right? So the way I do releases is I actually, I have the structure where I basically create versions in my backend document. So one thing you've probably noticed is I have all of my code together here in this document. And the reason for that is because having FeatureScript code that's shared in separate documents is incredibly cringe, in my opinion, because you have to keep going back and forth and like updating imports, because you'll be writing something that's shared. So you'd be wanting to make changes to a shared function, and you'll make changes, and then you want to see those changes, so you have to push the version, create the version, and then update all the references, right? Just to see your changes, and then you realize oh, I forgot this minor thing. So now you gotta create another version, update, right? See it again. Oh, I actually did need to do that, and change it back, right? Create a version, update it, right? It's incredibly tedious, and nobody has time for that. Life's too short. The only time that would ever make sense, I would think, is if your backend is really actually maintained, and you're really I have tests, and the interface is really well defined. It's not going to change very often / ever, right? These are my diehard utilities that I use in all of my scripts, but they also are incredibly stable and generic, and I don't ever really change them at all, right? So if you had something like that, maybe it could make sense, but for me, I say just have it all in one. And so then the problem, right, with having it all in one is, if I start working on a new feature, or make changes, right, that could break, any of my other scripts, right? And also from a user perspective, right, if anyone were to come in here and try to use scripts out of this document, right, I have a bunch of other random things like this utility, right, that prints, lookup tables. Obviously no user needs this, no user wants this. But if they were to come into this document and start adding features, it's going to be in the list because it's a feature script. It's technically valid, and so that's confusing, right? And then for example, when I was working on this, right, I made modifications to my boundary library, right, which is also used by my robot belt feature and some of my other features, right? And so obviously I tried to keep those up to date as I was modifying this, right? But if I mess those up, right, now those features are broken, right? And so when I release this, we have a problem. And so basically, and so the way I solve that problem is I have my backend and I have my front end document, right? And basically I control the versions in between them, right? So the way it works is when I want to release a script in my backend, I make a version for that script specifically, right? So for example here, I wanted to release Robot Belt, a new version of it. So I made a version for Robot Belt specifically, right? And then what I do is in my front end, right, this is just an export import of, the latest specific version of that feature script, right? And so what happens then, right, is when I release Robot Bearing Hat, right, I won't update this version, right, because this is still pointing to the latest version of Robot Belt, and I won't update this version, which is pointing to the latest version of Robot Pulley, right? So those will stay indexed to whatever version of the code, right, I last signed off on and said yeah, this is a good working version of Robot Belt, I'm ready to release, right? But Robot Bearing Hat will point to whatever latest version, right, I create for it. And so basically what that means is, each one of these is pointing to a snapshot version history of the code base as it existed at that point when I signed off for the feature. And so all of which is to say, these are all of these versions here are indexed, in here. They're pointing to the right ones basically. And so when I release one feature, it only releases that feature and not any others, right? And so that way, if Robot Belt is broken when I release Robot Bearing Hat, it doesn't matter because the Robot Belt version isn't getting changed to the new Robot Bearing Hat version. It's still indexed to Robot Belt, and that code hasn't changed because it's permanently fixed, right? And so I don't have to release a new version of Robot Belt until I've actually gone through and verified it's correct and I'm happy with it, and actually made changes and things, right? And then I can go ahead and release that. And so, and of course the thing is, I'm not like manually maintaining all of this, right? You've probably noticed these are automatically generated files. And so I actually have a, this is the code this is my GitHub repo. I have some API utils and stuff in here as well. And this is, I have all my code for like my robot manager app that I have. But I have basically an API script, a command line script that I can use to release my versions. So what this allows me to do is I can specify, let's see here, so I can do like a test release, right? And then I can specify like, I want to do a major release of like a major beta release of my new FeatureScript, and this one's called Robot Bearing Hat, right? So let's type Robot Bearing Hat, and description, initial beta release, right? Let's see here, didn't find it. Okay, yeah, my script might be a little broken, but basically it creates the version in the back end, right? So it versions it, then it finds the studio, and then it basically updates, it pushes it to the front end, and then creates the version in the front end as well, it optionally can. And so it just synchronizes them for me basically. And of course you could easily extend it, right? So I have a single document front end releasing all my FeatureScripts. And of course you could have a different document for each FeatureScript, right? And when you're using a script, it can just it can just find the right document. It doesn't matter whether it's the same document or a different one. And so that way, because when I create a version in here, right, like most of these scripts will have the same version because I haven't actually changed this import. But whatever script I do have, like when I create a new version of Robot Bearing Hat, right? Like all of the other scripts will become out of date because there's a new version in the document, even though they haven't actually changed, which is a little suboptimal. So if they're all in their own documents, then that wouldn't happen. And so the only reason I don't do that is one, I'd have to update my script to do it, which wouldn't be too bad actually. But two, Onshape, it's much easier for users to just come into one document, have all those FeatureScripts, and just add them all at once, rather than having to go between a bunch of documents. And so obviously, if you're not in an enterprise setup where you can control people's toolbars, it's probably better to just have a single document so your users can just find all your stuff at once, and they don't have to go hunting and because otherwise it's so hard to find stuff. Well, maybe it's gotten a little better now with some of the release stuff. But yeah, so that's basically the gist of it. And so, obviously if you're just getting started out, it's perfectly fine to have, a document with a FeatureScript in it and stuff like that. But, if you are starting to get a little more into things, and starting to have code you want to share and reuse and things, it might make sense to start looking at structures like this. So you're not having to constantly go back and forth and try to do versioning and all of that stuff. And so, I kind of like how this gives me a good layer of abstraction between my backend code base and then my users and what I'm delivering. So I can start because the biggest thing is this way I can have a half-baked remodel, or I can start playing around with a new feature or break something, right? Right now I'm actually in the middle of updating Robot Belt to use lookup tables, as I mentioned earlier. So I have the UI completely ripped out right now, or actually maybe not completely ripped out, but it's in a relatively non-functional state right now, right? And I certainly couldn't release it, but it doesn't matter. I can still release Robot Bearing Hat because even if I release Robot Bearing Hat, as long as I don't update this version in here, then it'll still be pointed to an old stable version of Robot Belt until I give it the thumbs up and I'm ready to release a new version of it. And so that is pretty nice, and keeps everything nice and stable, which is cool. And I think I have the same thing too, where like Robot Spacer right now has been very broken for the past couple months because I started rewriting it and I kind of gave up. And so, but it doesn't matter. I still have an old version that's released and it's 100% stable because, when I release like a new version of Robot Belt, this version it's linked to has, a broken version of Robot Spacer, but Robot Spacer isn't pointed at that version, so it doesn't matter. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, so that's how I do releases. But yeah, so I think this feature is done for now. I'll probably go ahead and release it. And we'll get it out in the wild, and then I'm sure people will have feedback and additional features they want, and we can look at those. But yeah, so hopefully this was helpful. It wasn't too long. I know the last episode was really, really long because I was just like getting super tired and crashing out, which is probably not amazing. So I'm happy, but this is kind of a fun format for me too. It's nice to be able to talk about my work a little bit, and share a little and give back to the community, and I don't know. I think it's been fun, and I could always see all sorts of different things. I could do like more targeted videos where I'm just talking about like functions or just like a specific aspect of FeatureScript or some some different parts, or I'm a little more prepared, or like giving like a slide deck or something. And I could also experiment with different formats, and I can also like play around with editing and things like that, and like actually cut down my videos and things. Although right now I'm just kind of starting off, just kind of rambling into my mic, and then if people, based on feedback, I can start seeing if it's worthwhile maybe to invest in spending a little more time with like editing and all that fun jazz. So yeah, it's been fun, and hopefully you found this helpful. If you have any questions, you can always contact me on the forums, shoot me an email, message me on Chief Delphi or Discord. Yeah, and I'll talk to you guys later.